Good evening. Tonight, the full story of what's been described as the War of the Gates. We have exclusive and disturbing pictures of the latest incident that violently shattered the peace of a West Wales beauty spot. Andrew and Karen Thomas live here at Blaen Pant Farm. They own this track to Pant y Castell Foch, the home of Eddie Roberts and Tricia Breckman. The Thomases have just agreed an out-of-court settlement in an action brought against them over the right-of-way. After the settlement, the gates are now open on the access track that is the only way in or out of Pant y Castell Foch at Maes y Bont near Cross Hands.
It makes an amazing difference to your psychological being. I think the gates being closed as they were was a terrible infringement on our freedom and our autonomy, and that was every single day, and we've lived with that for 3 years, so it was pretty ghastly.
The settlement has brought peace back to their small holding, but the exact terms remain confidential.
I can only tell you that they're reasonably satisfactory and that it's nice to see the gates open all the time.
It means Eddie Roberts and Tricia Breckman can drive out and into their small holding without the constant need to open and shut the gates, and they say without the fear of a confrontation.
I've just been assaulted.
No, you haven't.
Blaen Pant Farm, Maes y Bont.
You're in my space now. Get out.
Please, police.
Get out! Get out!
It was May the 2nd last year. Eddie Roberts left home in the taxi he drives. At 11:15, a visitor arrives. Andrew Thomas can be seen leading horses from field to field across the top of the access track, but not using it. It's exactly 11:23 when the visitor leaves. The timings are important because the police said later the Thomases claimed the movement of the horses didn't start until 11:30. It's about that time that Andrew Thomas is filmed coming down the field. He climbs the fence and closes the gate left open by the visitor as he left a few minutes earlier. Mrs. Breckman was hoping to go out and went to open the gate. What happened next was also recorded on her camcorder.
We'll wait for them to move their horses.
Andrew Thomas was then sitting on his side gate, looking at me as in a manner as much as to say, don't open that bottom gate. So I said to him, if you're moving horses across the right-of-way, that's fine. I'll give you 10 minutes and then we can have the gate open again.
Almost inevitably, words were exchanged across the gates.
What's your business?
You're interfering with my rights.
What is your business?
My business is my business, which is none of yours.
Right.
You are interfering with it. I cannot get on with my business because you seem to tell me so. Because you think you're God. But you are not God, and you can smirk all you want, you silly old woman.
After all the incidents that had taken place at the gates, Mrs. Breckman admits feeling trapped in her own home.
I can't stand this. I must go in. I must open this gate. I must open it. I can't bear to see it like this. It upsets me so much.
Andrew Thomas had disappeared, and there was no sign of horses being moved inside the fenced and gated area of the track. Almost 25 minutes after he'd called her a silly old woman, she opened the gate. According to the camera timing, it was 2 minutes before noon as she headed back towards her cottage.
As I was walking away, I heard the top gate being opened. As I turned round, I saw Cheryl Jones opening the top gate, and Andrew Thomas then drove this horse down into the right-of-way by using a stick with a plastic bag on the end.
Go on. Psh. Psh.
I just encouraged it back up again, thinking that Andrew Thomas will now come and collect this horse. But he didn't. He came back, entered the right-of-way, and started brandishing this stick at this horse with a plastic bag on it, scaring it to death.
Driving it down here.
The camera was to show that he drove the horse back down the track towards Mrs. Breckman on 6 separate occasions.
I'm talking to myself all day asking you to close the gate. Open it. Bring the rest of the horses across. Leave the gate open. Look, it's broken here.
Go on.
It was a youngster as well, it was a yearling, so they're totally unschooled, totally unpredictable.
Leave the gate open.
Karen Thomas then appeared. Cheryl Jones was there, so I have 3 people now and a horse that was getting very, very agitated. Andrew Thomas then drove it once more down past me, so close to me it could have bowled me over.
Oh my God.
She crossed towards me on the left-hand side of the drive, as if she was going to bowl me over. I put my hand out to stop her pushing into me, and the minute she walked into my hand,
Get off of my
she cried out, "Assault!
Isn't
Assault!"
Get
off!
off!
999!
Get off!
999! Now, please!
Get off of my property.
Assault the sheriff.
999!
Common assault.
Two
She just
witnesses!
pushed you. Common assault.
I can hold you
Again.
back. You're
no,
on
that
my
is
property.
common assault!
No, it isn't.
That is common
Don't
assault!
come into my space. Don't
I
come
need
into
the
my
police
space.
now! Now!
Don't come into my space. Get out.
You!
Get out.
You have just
Don't
assaulted
come
me!
into my space.
Take that camera!
Get out.
Take that camera!
Get out. Your
Police,
horse is up
please,
there.
I've
Get
just
out.
been assaulted!
No, you haven't.
Blind Pan Farm, Mysobont.
You're in my space now. Get out.
Please, police,
Get out.
Take this camera.
Get out.
Take this camera.
Get out. Get out. Get out.
Andrew,
Get out. Get out.
police, can I have the
Get
horse,
out.
please?
Get out. Get out.
My
Get
neighbour.
out.
Don't.
Get out of my space.
Go
Get
on.
out.
Go on.
You stupid. You're in name.
SA147
You're
Sierra
psychotic.
Whiskey. My neighbour has just assaulted me twice. I've got 2 neighbours.
I was petrified because I had 3 people alleging that I've assaulted her. I could have been hurt at any time by any one of them and or the horse. So I knew that I had to get in quickly, and that's what I did. I was absolutely petrified.
Inside, she immediately pressed the panic alarm, which had been installed by the police. She also telephoned Eddie Roberts. As the Thomases left her garden, she was expecting the police to come to her aid. She says she was very surprised at what happened next. When the police arrived, 20 minutes later, they came from Blind Pan Farm next door. They'd been to hear the Thomases' account of what had happened. Mrs. Breckman was not about to get the sympathy she somehow expected.
They stood either side in the kitchen, and I was still in the sitting room, and I started to walk towards them. As I did so, neither of them said a word to me. They just carried on looking at each other, totally ignoring me. And eventually, one of them said to me, "Well, are you going to tell us what's been going on then?" in a very brusque, hostile manner. And as soon as he said it, he turned away from me and looked up at the ceiling. So I was now looking at his back and the back of his head, which was a very clear message to me that he actually didn't want to know what had been going on.
They wanted to see the camera footage, but she didn't want to show it to them until her partner, Eddie Roberts, returned home.
Bearing in mind what I'm living with, and I'm not living with truth and honesty, I was scared then to give them my camcorder, because that was my evidence of the fact that I hadn't actually touched her.
But they weren't prepared to wait. She was handcuffed.
I was absolutely stunned. And he said, "We're arresting you for assaulting Karen Thomas."
Mrs. Breckman suffers from rheumatoid arthritis and has problems with her wrists.
I was exceedingly distressed by now. The handcuffs were really hurting. And I asked if they could loosen them, to which they both replied, "No, certainly not, they're fine."
Her dogs were outside on long leashes in which they could get entangled.
"Please let me put my dogs indoors. Please let me make them safe." "No," came the answer, "certainly not."
An hour after the incident began, she was led away, handcuffed and under arrest. After the break, find out what happened next. Tricia Breckman had been handcuffed and the police were taking her away. It wasn't the first time she'd been arrested over a series of incidents going back 3 years. As the police car left, the taxi driven by her partner Eddie Roberts had arrived at the top gate.
I called out to him very loudly, "Would you please leave that gate open, I'm coming down." He ignored that totally and ignored looking at me completely, got back in the vehicle and off they drove up to the top. And I drove down.
Eddie Roberts didn't see Tricia Breckman in the police car.
And I said to the police officers, "Can you please stop and tell Eddie what's happening, that you've arrested me?" So he pulled over. By this time, Eddie is already coming down the drive. He got out of the car, got straight back in the car and said, he doesn't wish to speak to us. He didn't say a word to Eddie. He didn't call out to him at all.
Because the dogs were outside on their leashes, I assumed Tricia was home because she wouldn't leave them out there. I mean, it would be a dangerous thing to do, to leave them on those long leashes. So I assumed she was here, and I came in and she wasn't indoors, and I called out, went outside, looked around, thinking perhaps she was with the hens, and she just wasn't around. Then I came in, back into the property, saw the camera, looked at the camera, and then I saw what had taken place with regard to the arrest.
After he'd watched the incident on the camcorder, he drove to Carmarthen to have it copied. He gave this to their solicitor and he says the police had it by 5 at the latest and were able to watch it before they questioned Mrs. Breckman. The police said the Thomases had made claims, which they put to her.
They say that as a result of you opening the lower gates and causing the animal to startle by making a noise, that the animal got free and entered your property. Is that correct? No comment.
Mrs. Breckman pointed out to us that there was no horse on the track within the fences when she opened the gate. The top gate was opened after she'd opened the bottom gate. Andrew Thomas then clearly drove the horse onto the track.
Karen
9 minutes and
Thomas would say that she attempted to get the animal back out of your garden area. She walked down the lane and you were standing in the lane, and as she approached you, intending to pass you to get the horse out, that you physically stopped her, stood in front of her, and that you pushed her to the chest. And then when she's attempted to move past you, you were again then assaulted her by pushing her to the neck and face area. Is that correct?
No comment.
Mrs. Breckman says the pictures clearly show Karen Thomas is making no attempt to retrieve the horse. There were other claims not backed by the pictures. After 8 hours at the police station, she was bailed. It was 2 months before she was told what the Crown Prosecution Service had advised, and then only after she asked for information.
The CPS advised the police that there were no charges to be brought against myself, but there were also no charges to be brought against the Thomases and Cheryl Jones.
The CPS said there were inconsistencies between what she'd told the police and what was shown by the cameras. She's still trying to find out what these are.
The CPS have gone out of their way not to charge the Thomases with certain things they've done to us. By the same token, the CPS have also gone out of their way to bring prosecutions against me with no evidence to substantiate the allegations. I think that really speaks for itself.
The dispute had its origins in a planning row. After the Thomases moved to Blaen Pant Farm, the then owner of Pantacastell Fach next door complained they were running a haulage business without planning permission. He was advised to keep logs of lorry movements by the council. The council took no action. When Tricia Breckman bought the cottage in 2003 with Eddie Roberts, they didn't know what was going on next door.
We moved to this particular area because we liked the rolling countryside, really. And of course we got an opportunity to buy a place which was very, very nice.
I love being outside. I love the garden. I love growing vegetables, that kind of thing. Just peace and quiet.
The lorries next door soon destroyed that peace and quiet. They complained to the council, who they say advised them to film the lorries. They did, but the council still took no action. But the Thomases did. They began to narrow the access track. They'd also begun to film what was happening, as Tricia Breckman later discovered.
They've had a lot of people taking photographs of the lane, obviously trying to, sort of insinuate that we're causing problems, but I would say that this has been done deliberately to try and incriminate us. 1:30.
2 months later, in March 2005, Tricia Breckman filmed the Thomases as they parked a second-hand furniture lorry outside the back window of her cottage.
I spoke to the council about that because not only is it awful to look at, it's intimidating too to have that right next to your windows. And the council did say that it would be removed within 28 days, but it never was.
The lorries kept on going out and coming in. The council said it was difficult to identify a breach of planning control to warrant enforcement. The couple were at a meeting in December 2005 when Carmarthenshire councillors were told enforcing action is discretionary. It is not a neighbour protection service. Pigs had been moved behind the cottage beneath Tricia Breckman's bedroom window. Karen Thomas had named them Eddie and Trish.
You're not to poke your nose into where it's not wanted, Trish.
Even more intimidating, according to Tricia Breckman and Eddie Roberts, was the boarding up of the gates at the top and bottom of the access track to their cottage. The Thomases said it was so they could move horses from one field to another in safety across the track. As these pictures show, they didn't use the boarded up gates to move their horses. The security camera and camcorder were to capture a number of incidents as the gates became the front line in the dispute. The Thomases wanted them closed all the time. Eddie Roberts and Tricia Breckman believed that was unnecessary.
If I was as backward as you, I would be worried.
Do you know,
if I was as backward as you and was as low as you two, no wonder you crawl all over England.
No, I think we'll keep it. Mr. Roberts.
Mr. Wright, we'll seek some legal advice. How was that, man?
that's a nice bit of violence.
But the Crown Prosecution Service didn't agree. They took the view that it was the couple who were harassing the Thomases.
It entitles you to open the gates and put in a lock on both of them. You're obstructing my right of way, Mr. Roberts. How was that, man?
Police delivered a schedule of incidents which the CPS said amounted to harassment of the Thomases. Tricia Breckman was charged twice with harassment. Both cases were discontinued. She was found guilty of assaulting Karen Thomas, but the conviction was quashed on appeal.
Before you take a picture, if you wouldn't mind, please. Thank you very much.
Tricia Breckman has drawn up a detailed dossier of 15 incidents in which she says the filmed evidence directly contradicts the claims made by the Thomases. The CPS have told us in the past that they're satisfied they've acted properly and professionally. They declined to take part in this programme.
He's got a problem with his video camera.
Andrew Thomas was found guilty of the common assault of 2 young women who intervened in a confrontation with Eddie Roberts in the centre of Carmarthen.
What about your own business then? What are you interfering with me?
The acting chief constable of Dyfed-Powys Police, Andy Edwards, declined to take part in this programme. He told us the police had attended over 160 incidents in the dispute, which had resulted in 29 complaints against 24 police officers. Some were still under consideration, so it would be inappropriate to comment further. The council had also reacted to complaints about them from Mrs. Breckman and Mr. Roberts. The couple have been told by senior officials they can only contact officers and councillors through one named officer.
It's not our intention to be controlled and gagged by this council, because it is a genuine attempt to gag us. In other words, shut up or you're in trouble. However, we don't believe that they can tell us who and who we cannot speak to.
They've now delivered a letter to every councillor via the council. They don't know whether they were passed on. They've not had a single reply. They do believe the attitude of some police officers has changed towards them, and that the gates on their access track will remain open.
Now I know that when I come home, I don't have anything to fear. I have nothing to worry about, and I can come home in complete freedom and a feeling of just enjoying coming home, whereas before I could never feel like that. I used to dread coming home, and equally I wouldn't look forward to going out either. So it's lifted that whole huge cloud. It's amazing. It's our autonomy, isn't it, Eddie?
It is.
And I feel as though we have our freedom back.
We asked Andrew and Karen Thomas and Cheryl Jones for an interview for this programme. We particularly wanted to ask them about the incident with the horse. None of them replied. Carmarthenshire County Council say that some councillors have complained about the number of calls Tricia Breckman and Eddie Roberts have made to them. The council believes this amounts to harassment. Well, don't forget you can see this programme again on ITV Local. That's Wales This Week. Good night.